I want to tell you about two men. One of them walked into my courtroom with a smirk on his face and not a single doubt in his mind that he was going to walk right back out the same way he came in. The other one was sitting quietly in the back row. No uniform, no badge visible. Just a man in a plain gray jacket, hands folded in his lap, watching everything. His son didn't know he was there. By the time that morning was over, there wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom. And the moment that broke everyone, the moment I still think about, wasn't the sentence. It wasn't the video footage. It wasn't even the defendant finally crumbling after 2 hours of arrogance. It was a father walking down the center aisle of my courtroom to do the hardest thing a parent can ever do. Stay with me. This story matters. If you believe that real courage sometimes looks like a father choosing his principles over protecting his child, please subscribe right now. Every story I share comes from a lifetime on this bench. Real people, real consequences. I don't want you to miss a single one. Let me start with Robert Martinez, because this story belongs to him first. Robert Martinez is 70 years old. He served 2 tours in Vietnam with the United States Marine Corps. He came home with a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star for valor. He then spent 30 years as a firefighter in this city, running into burning buildings while everyone else ran out. He raised his children here. He buried his wife here. He coached Little League for 11 years. He has given more to this community than most people will give in 3 lifetimes. On a Tuesday afternoon in October, he was doing what he did every day at that hour, walking his dog through a public park. A simple thing, the kind of quiet afternoon a man earns after 50 years of service. That was all he was doing. Derek Cole is 32 years old. He drove his BMW through that same public park at a speed that had no business being anywhere near families and children and a 70-year-old veteran walking his dog. When Robert Martinez raised one hand, one calm, steady, completely reasonable gesture asking the driver to slow down, Derek Cole did not slow down. He stopped his car, got out, walked over to Robert Martinez with purpose, and shoved him to the ground. Martinez hit the pavement hard. When bystanders rushed over, Derek Cole stood over the fallen veteran and announced, loudly enough for multiple witnesses to hear, that his father was the police chief of this city, and that anyone who called the police was welcome to try their luck. Then he got back in his BMW and drove away. He left Robert Martinez on the ground and drove away. 3 witnesses gave statements. A security camera captured every second of it. Robert Martinez was taken to the hospital. He had a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a fractured wrist. He spent 2 nights away from his home, his dog, and the quiet routine he had built in the years since his wife passed. 23 seconds. That is how long the footage shows between the shove and the moment Derek Cole got back in his car. 23 seconds to put a decorated veteran in the hospital for 2 nights. When the footage went public, this city responded the way good communities respond. Veteran advocacy groups came forward. Citizens demanded accountability. The district attorney's office filed charges of assault and battery on an elderly person against Derek Michael Cole, son of Police Chief Thomas Cole. 3 weeks later, Derek Cole walked into my courtroom. I need you to picture this carefully, because how a person enters a room tells you a great deal about who they are before they say a single word. He came in like he was arriving somewhere that held no power over him. Expensive suit, designer watch, shoes polished to a shine, and the smirk. I have been on this bench for 30 years, and I have developed a thorough catalog of the ways people carry their arrogance. Derek Cole's was the particular kind that belongs to people who have spent their entire lives having problems made to disappear. The smirk of someone who has genuinely never been told that the world does not owe them accommodation. His attorney walked beside him, one of the most expensive defense lawyers this city has to offer, already scanning the room, calculating angles, preparing arguments. Good at his job, no question. But even the best attorney cannot argue with security footage. Derek Cole walked past the gallery, past the row where Robert Martinez sat quietly in his veteran's cap, his broken wrist in a cast, his face carrying the steady dignity of a man who has survived genuinely difficult things and knows the difference between hardship and inconvenience. Derek Cole did not look at him, not a glance, not a flicker. He looked straight ahead and kept walking, as if Robert Martinez was not in the room. That is not nervousness. Nervous people steal glances. What Derek displayed was something colder, the casual, unconsidered blindness of someone who simply does not register certain people as worth noticing. I held on to that. When I read the charges and asked for his plea, his attorney moved immediately to speak for him, began floating the idea of mistaken identity, with the security footage sitting right there in evidence, reviewed and authenticated. I stopped that conversation and asked the defendant to speak for himself. Derek Cole stood up, adjusted his jacket with the ease of a man who has never once been truly uncomfortable in a room, looked at me directly, and called the entire proceeding ridiculous. The gallery reacted. I let them. Then I waited for quiet. "Mr. Cole," I said, "you are standing in this courtroom to answer for putting a 70-year-old man in the hospital, a man with a Purple Heart, 30 years as a firefighter in this city. That is your characterization of these proceedings. Ridiculous." He met my eyes. "Your Honor, some old guy stepped in front of my car and made a scene. I barely touched him." The gallery exhaled sharply. Someone in the back said something under their breath. Some old guy. I have seen a great deal in 30 years. I have heard defendants minimize what they did in many creative ways. But the specific phrase, "some old guy," carries a particular weight. It does not just minimize the act. It erases the person. It says that the human being you harmed was so far beneath your consideration that they do not even warrant a description. They are a category, an obstacle, a minor inconvenience, assigned a dismissive label and filed away. I looked at Robert Martinez and asked him to stand and introduce himself to the court. He rose slowly, supporting himself with his good arm. He did not raise his voice. He did not perform anything. He simply told the truth in the voice of a man who has absolutely nothing to prove. 2 tours in Vietnam, decorated for valor. 30 years protecting this city as a firefighter. 50 years of life given to this community. And 3 weeks ago, the man standing across from him knocked him to the ground for asking him to drive carefully through a park where children play. Calm, clear, complete. The courtroom went to a particular kind of quiet. Not just the absence of sound, the presence of something. A collective recognition settling over the room. I watched Derek Cole during that silence. Something moved across his face. Not remorse, not yet. Something closer to the first uncomfortable awareness that what he had done might be larger than he had allowed himself to consider. Then I played the footage. Everyone in that courtroom watched the BMW moving too fast through a public park. Watched Robert Martinez raise one hand, that single calm gesture. Watched Derek Cole slam his brakes, get out, walk toward the veteran with clear intention, shove him. Watched a 70-year-old man go down. Watched Derek Cole stand over him, point at witnesses, make his announcement about his father, then return to his car and drive away. 23 seconds on the screen, 2 nights in the hospital in real life. When the footage ended, Derek Cole's explanation was that he had been having a bad day, that he had received difficult news that morning, that he had not been thinking clearly. I looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Cole," I said quietly, "I have sat in this chair for 30 years. I have had defendants come before me who lost their jobs that week, their homes that month, their children that year. People carrying grief that would buckle most of us. And they do not shove elderly veterans to the ground in public parks because they are having a difficult morning. I paused. A bad day is not a reason. It is not even a passable excuse. It is what you offer when every other explanation has been taken away. His attorney leaned in, spoke quietly to him. Derek Cole looked at the table. I was preparing to move to sentencing, and then my clerk handed me a note. I read it. I looked up at the gallery, at the back row. There was a man sitting there in a plain gray jacket and dark slacks, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, the posture of someone who has spent decades in law enforcement, a particular way of sitting that never fully relaxes. He had been there the entire hearing. He had not identified himself. He had not made a sound. He was watching his son with an expression I recognized. I have seen it before on the faces of parents in family court. The expression of someone absorbing a truth they had hoped would turn out differently and now cannot avoid. I looked at him. He met my eyes and gave a single, small nod. "Mr. Thomas Cole," I said, and my voice carried through the entire room. "I would ask you to please come forward." The gallery turned as one. Derek Cole spun in his chair, and the moment he saw his father walking down that center aisle, plain clothes, no uniform, no badge, just a man carrying the full weight of what he had witnessed that morning, something happened to Derek Cole's face that I will not forget. The arrogance did not fade. It collapsed. Instantly, completely, like a wall that had been undermined from the foundation and finally gave way all at once. His jaw loosened. His shoulders dropped. For the first time since he had walked into my courtroom, Derek Cole looked like a 32-year-old man who understood that something serious was happening. Chief Thomas Cole came to the front. He stood with his hands at his sides, his back straight, his face composed into something that required visible effort to hold together. I gave him the opportunity to address the court. He did not make excuses. He did not perform the careful, calculated response of a man trying to balance protecting his child with appearing to take things seriously. He did not ask for leniency. He did not suggest his son had made a mistake and would benefit from another chance. He told the truth. He told the court that he had spent 35 years serving this city, that he had upheld the law through cases that tested every part of him, that not once had he believed his badge gave him or anyone in his family the right to stand above the same laws he had sworn to uphold. He said he had watched the security footage the day after the incident. He had read the hospital reports. He had sat with all of it. His voice was steady until the next part. Then it cracked slightly, just enough to show that what he was saying was not a performance. He said he had believed he had taught his son the meaning of service, the obligation to protect the vulnerable, the simple requirement to treat every human being with dignity, and that somewhere, somehow, he had failed, and that the evidence of that failure was standing right there in his courtroom. He looked at Derek. He looked at him the way a father looks at a child when love and devastation are occupying the same moment. "I love you," he said. "That will not change. But love does not mean protecting you from what you've earned. Real love means holding you accountable so you can become who you're supposed to be." Then he turned back to me. "Whatever sentence this court determines is right, it has my full support. My son assaulted a decorated veteran. He showed no remorse and disrespected everything I have spent my life standing for." He paused. "He should face the full weight of the law, and I am asking you not to go easy on him. He needs to learn this now, before someone else is hurt." The courtroom was completely silent. I have seen courage in many forms in 30 years. I have seen people stand up in terrifying situations and hold their ground. But what Thomas Cole did that morning, standing in a public courtroom in front of reporters and veteran advocacy groups, and the man his son had put in the hospital, and saying without hesitation that his child deserved to be fully held accountable. That required a kind of courage that most people are never tested for and would not find if they were. He understood something that too many parents in his position do not understand. Every time his badge had smoothed something over, every time Derek had been shielded from a consequence, every time a problem had been quietly resolved, he had been taking something essential away from his son. The understanding that his choices had real weight, real cost in the real world. He had not protected Derek, he had deprived him, and he was standing there saying so out loud on the record. Before I delivered the sentence, I gave Robert Martinez the floor. He stood. He looked at Derek Cole for a moment, just looked at him, calmly, the way a man looks at something he has already made his peace with. And then he spoke. He said he did not want revenge, that he had never wanted revenge, that what he wanted was simple. He wanted the young man standing across from him to understand, genuinely understand, that every person he would ever meet in his life deserved to be treated with basic human dignity, that age and rank and title were beside the point, that he hoped, truly hoped, that when Derek came out the other side of what was coming, he would carry that understanding with him. He said if Derek genuinely learned that lesson, the hospital stay would have been worth it. Then he sat down. I held those words for a moment. A man who had every reason in the world for bitterness, for demands, for anger, and what he chose to bring into that room was the desire for the person who hurt him to become better, not to suffer, to change. That is not weakness. That is the rarest kind of strength, the kind that only comes from having lived through genuinely hard things and kept your humanity intact on the other side. I delivered the sentence, 90 days in county correctional, 200 hours of community service, specifically at the VA hospital working directly with elderly veterans, 1 full year of anger management counseling, a formal written apology to Robert Martinez to be read aloud in open court, a face-to-face meeting with Martinez to deliver that apology personally, a public video statement explaining what he did, why it was wrong, and what he was doing to address it. And upon completing his sentence, Derek would speak to police academy recruits about privilege, accountability, and what it costs when a person believes they are exempt from consequence. Every element was intentional. Every part was designed not just to punish, but to build, piece by piece, a genuine understanding of who Robert Martinez was and what Derek had actually done to him. Working at the VA hospital does not just fulfill a requirement. It puts you in rooms with men like Robert Martinez day after day until they stop being abstractions and become people. Chief Cole added one more thing. He told the court that Derek would be leaving his home, effective immediately. He was 32 years old, and the arrangement of a grown man living under his father's name and protection was over. He was going to learn to stand on his own. When the officers came to take Derek into custody, Thomas Cole walked to his son. They stood face to face, and then the chief pulled his son into a tight embrace. No hesitation, no performance, no condition. He told him he loved him. He told him he would get through this. He told him that when he came out the other side, he would be the man he was always supposed to be. Derek Cole, who had walked into that courtroom smirking, was sobbing. The officers let him out. Thomas Cole stood at the end of the aisle and watched his son go through those doors. He didn't move. Tears running freely down his face, just stood there. 35 years of service, one impossible morning, and a father who had done the right thing at the highest personal cost. I stepped down from my bench and shook his hand. Two men who had spent their careers standing before difficult truths, acknowledging each other. 90 days later, Derek Cole walked out of that facility a different man. Not perfect. I have never dealt in fairy tales, but different, quieter. The smirk was gone. The certainty was gone. He completed his 200 hours at the VA hospital and then kept showing up, Long after his obligation was fulfilled, he kept going. He learned names. He listened to stories. He sat with men who had seen things that made his bad day in the park look like the trivial inconvenience it always was. He met privately with Robert Martinez to deliver his apology in person. Both men described that meeting as healing. Martinez became a mentor to him. A relationship born in violence and injustice slowly rebuilt itself on honesty and mutual respect. The video apology was watched by millions of people. A man with every advantage, saying plainly and without softening, "I was wrong. I believed my father's position made me untouchable. I was wrong about that too." Derek Cole now works as an advocate for veteran services. He speaks at the police academy. He tells his story without softening it, not to humiliate himself, but because he understands that somewhere out there is someone who needs to hear it before they end up in a courtroom explaining their bad day to a judge. I have been thinking about this case for a long time now. I keep coming back to three people and what each of them showed us. Robert Martinez showed us that the most powerful response to being wronged is not rage. It is not demands or the performance of victimhood. It is looking at the person who hurt you and deciding that what matters most is who they become. That is harder than anger. Anger is immediate and simple. Grace requires you to look past your own pain towards something beyond it. Robert Martinez did that genuinely, without effort, without fanfare, because it was simply who he was. Thomas Cole showed us the difference between protecting your child and enabling them. He understood in the most painful possible moment that every time he had made a consequence disappear, he had stolen from his son the chance to understand that his actions carried real weight. And so when it mattered most, he stepped aside. He did not make it go away. He made it count. And Derek Cole showed us something that is easy to miss in all the drama of what came before. He showed us that people can change, not easily, not without cost, not without being genuinely held accountable in a way that cannot be smoothed over or paid away. But they can change. And when they do, when the accountability and the grace and a father's brutal, loving honesty combine into the right set of conditions, justice does what it was always meant to do. Not just punish, transform. That is the point. That has always been the point. If this story moved something in you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And leave me a comment telling me this. Have you ever watched someone make the hard choice, the right choice, at real personal cost? What did that look like? I read every comment, and those moments deserve to be remembered.